It's me again. Thanks for sticking around, everyone, and thanks for joining this session. I'm super excited to dig into it. Building Europe's global tech edge. This question's for both of you. Archie, I'll start with you. This global tech race is often framed as this two people kind of battle, the US and China. Europe often doesn't enter that conversation, but in your view, where is Europe, what is Europe bringing to the table in this kind of global tech development, global tech race?
Yeah, I think you can't lie that Europe is behind. But where Europe is insanely strong is on talent. We've got, Oxford, Cambridge, amazing universities. We've actually got a huge amount of ambition. My colleagues and friends and people in the startups community in London are extremely ambitious and are proving that you can build globally defining companies now. There is a real mindset shift changing. But we are behind. But I think that if you look 10 years ahead, instead of just looking a year ahead, we can compete.
Can I just, before I get to you, Lin, can I just get a quick show of hands? Who knows Tencent? Knows it? That's a pretty good start. Good. So, Lin, you head up Tencent's investments in Europe and North America. So you've got a really good global perspective as well. Again, when you look at Europe, what is Europe bringing to the table when you talk about tech development here?
I think Europe is incredibly strong in the technical depth as well as the creativity. And as Archie mentioned, Oxford, my own university, and it's very strong in deep science, and similarly for Cambridge. And different pockets of tech ecosystem across Europe. For example, Finland, we invested in Supercell, and Ilkka Paananen, the founder, was from Aalto University, which is perhaps less heard of in other parts of the world, but it's incredibly strong in design. And similarly, we invested in Spotify back in 2017. And in Nordics, we see lots of talent in product design. They always have fast iteration and always have users in mind with stunning design. And obviously, there are other parts of ecosystem. Vienna is very strong in photonics, and Germany very strong in all kinds of deep tech as well as automation. So, yeah. Well, for example, myself, I'm based out of London, and so are our investment team. So that tells you there is nowhere else we want to be to find the best AI talent.
Archie, you were being convinced to set up your company, Fyxer, in San Francisco, right? But you decided ultimately to move back to London and set up shop there. What was driving that decision?
Yeah, I think it was just kind of dual decision. I think you have to be in the US. We have US offices. But it's, for us, where we believed we would get the best engineering talent. And given that we're three lads from London, that's where our network is. And yeah, both culturally and the attraction and being number one in London has enabled us to get the best talent. I think that you can't win on the global stage just from London, so you have to have both. But at the core, we chose the engineering team to be based there.
Ling, there was this view at once that European founders didn't think global enough versus, say, US and Chinese founders as well. Has that changed?
I think in the past decade, we can definitely see a shift. For example, UiPath, our investee, was originally a small startup from Romania. And then we backed them in we led Series E and then supported them through a very successful IPO. And then nowadays, even Lovable, which has been talked a lot at this summit, we can see the founders nowadays always have global mindset from day one, and incredibly speed of iteration. For example, Lovable is the fastest growing company from 0 to $100 million within 8 months. So, and so is Fyxer, very, very fast growth. So Yeah, I think the next challenge is how we bridge the deep science with commercialization and the globalization, so to bring them to the global stage, which Tencent can actually help. We have a global network of ecosystem and investees.
Just to Ling's point about, I guess, scaling more broadly, again, and globalization, how do you approach scaling across various countries, particularly outside of Europe?
I think there's maybe a feeling that Silicon Valley has these magic secrets. I actually lived there last year for them, and felt that there is amazing talent there and people to learn from. But whether it's Anton at Lovable, whether it's Victor at Synthesia, they're proving that you can scale at the global stage, multi-office. The trick is really just belief. It's like relentless belief that you can, and it's just taking each day at a time. The structures are there for technology to scale. We are currently in almost every country, and the positioning isn't any different whether you're in the US or whether you're in Europe. You just need to move extremely fast.
But are there any unique challenges for this region versus kind of, say, the US?
I don't see so. I think there's a huge amount of strength. I think the strength is that you're allowed to lock in. You're allowed to build without a huge amount of noise around you. In Silicon Valley, it is hugely kind of rewarding and an amazing feeling of optimism. But it can actually be a real distraction. You can end up getting sucked into different ideas, whereas the scene is quieter in London and allows you to lock down and build and focus on building the best products.
Ling, from an investor point of view, there's a lot of debate about AI right now, and in terms of, how do you back enduring companies? How do you figure out what's real, what's just noise? What are some of the thought processes as you approach those questions and think about investment?
That's a great question. So we always try and back founders with long game in mind, with a combination of deep technical expertise and adaptive thinking. My own framework is we use people, problem, and the perspective we can bring. So very easy to remember 3 Ps. So in terms of people, those are the founders. Actually, a week ago, I was at a talk with Harry Stebbings, and he mentioned the most ambitious founders are all psychologically unhinged. I think that's probably a phrase that's exaggerated, but lots of the successful founders we have seen are obsessive with the problems they are trying to solve. And those problems aren't the next, looking at, next year, in a year's time is no longer relevant, but they will be the enduring problems that still matter a decade from now. So we are looking at how transformative the problems they are trying to solve. And so that's the second point. The third point is perspective. So for example, we wouldn't be investing in real estate because that's not our strength. But we leverage Tencent's AI, deep technical expertise, science expertise to try and evaluate all these startups and to see what's the real technical moat, and then help us to try and identify the best opportunities which are not easy to replicate. So in the end, the best businesses or founders are the ones we find always have a long game in mind, building, bringing today's breakthroughs into tomorrow's enduring businesses.
Harry Stebbings is one of our investors. He's spot on. He also he lives that. He lives that sort of relentless founder life. The thing that Harry will make really clear is that this whole game of ARR has happened. People just posting their revenue, Lovable, huge respect to them, 0 to 8 million. But the real hard thing is what Lin says there about long-term and retention.
Yep.
If you're lucky enough to have Harry as your investor, after a board meeting, he actually posted our retention numbers on LinkedIn, and they went viral. So The game here is, yes, playing long term. And so ARR is not easy, but it's definitely the hard part is retention.
So that's what I was going to ask you, because Ling mentioned a really important word there, and that is moat. And we talk a lot about moat. You talk about the infrastructure layer. You talk about a company like NVIDIA. The moat is clear. When we look at the application layer where you play, you're solving a problem which no doubt everyone has an issue with, and that is insane email inboxes and trying to figure all that out. But also, you're playing in an area where there is intense competition, right? And there's questions, well, what if Google just uses all of its money, all of its resource to come up with something in Gmail that's as good as what you're doing? It's a genuine question. So how are you thinking about moat and that long-term longevity, retention, and building a real defendable and profitable, eventually, business model?
Yeah, I think the lazy bet for startups and what the breakout startups of our generation have done is the lazy bet has been to assume that the foundational models are going to get better and better. But we're really seeing a plateau. We're seeing that the kind of category-defining winners, the Cursors, the Lovables, the Harveys, the Fyxers, what they're doing is they're bringing model development in-house. It's a contrarian view, and a view that we've actually had to defend for a number of years. But really, ironically, in order to be incredible at AI, and to be an incredible AI company, you need to have your own AI. And what a lot of startups, I think, have missed is that they've focused on the application layer, on the UI, something you can copy overnight, whereas you can't copy someone's AI overnight. And to your point about money, it's really interesting. One would assume that a bigger model might perform better, a smarter model, but actually it's much more about relevance. And something like email, compared to code, which is much more subjective. There's no objective truth. There's no way it works. It's not like code. There's the tone. There's the context. There's the switching. Something like that, someone needs to write the rule books. And we believe rule books and innovation happens within startups. It doesn't happen at the larger level.
Ling, what's your view on what Archie's saying, actually? Because it's really interesting that the model is kind of a lazy bet. Is that something you've seen as well? Do you prefer to look at companies that are building their own models and their own technology in that sense?
I think it's case by case, but on the philosophy, I totally agree with Archie. So we need to, or the companies, they need to build a very strong foundation, substrate, before it scales. And once it scales, it may not stay on the whole same course. It needs to pivot when the environment or the market changes and adapts as the market evolves. For example, as most of you may have heard Manus AI talking earlier, so we were one of their early investors. And around the time it was incredible founders were just, okay, these are the genius founders we are investing. And they were an AI website plugin. And then they pivoted to AI agent, identify what are the important problems they are trying to solve. And not only stay in the home market, but expanded to the US, to the rest of the world. So that's the kind of thing we like founders with adaptive thinking and the agility to execute, as well as spotting trends before the trend becomes a trend. So I think that's very important.
We were having conversations on CNBC yesterday, and a big focus is on the current state of the markets right now, valuation, bubbles. And we had the CEO of Fyxer on, Hovhannes Avayan, and he used a really interesting phrase. He said, we were talking about vibe coding, vibe design, and he used the phrase vibe revenue to describe effectively companies raising huge amounts of money, big valuations, with very little to show for it. Just Archie, I'll start with you. What is your current read on where we are in this kind of big investment cycle? Is this a bubble right now?
Well, I think I sort of wondered that question last year. I was actually last year living in a monastery.
Right.
This monastery was dedicated to building.
Yeah.
And that was the service. So it brought 10 AI companies from around the world to live together for 12 weeks. And they basically subtracted everything out of your life other than growing your startup. And that definitely felt like a bubble. However, I think to his point, my peers in there what they were doing is they were all building the future. Their ideas were so much more wow than us. One of them was building an AI doctor to cure addiction. The other was building and developing from cells animal organs. And the thing we were doing was just fixing email, and potentially like pretty boring. And so I think we don't get a lot of wow factor revenue, but we get a lot of very sticky workflow revenue. We get revenue that people keep on using us. So 90% of our users are still paying with us after 3 months. It's sort of unheard of in consumer. And so for us, we focus less on wow factor, more on workflow revenue.
And Ling, your view on kind of the current state of the market, if you believe there's a bubble right now and valuations are too high?
I think we do believe that AI is a genuinely transformative technology, and we've started investing in AI from a decade ago. And if we look at lots of the money that's going into AI, they're actually going into building sustainable, the actual foundation for the infrastructure that's going to make people's lives much more efficient or more enjoyable or more creativity. So, but there are other parts of the market which has some hype and valuations are very high. But with any new technology that comes along, it's expected there is always excitement. But if we look at today, the Magnificent Seven and the dot-com bubble, so actually 6 out of the 7 companies are all built before 2000. So even if the bubble bursts, I think the most enduring companies, the genuine leaders, will actually emerge out of this race.
Fascinating. We've got about a minute left, so just a one-sentence answer. If we're sat here in a year's time, Ling, I'll start with you. What do you think we're going to be talking about?
What's going to be a new paradigm in terms of the foundation models? And what are the genuine use cases? What kind of companies have emerged from burning capital but with efficient profit generation or value creation?
Great. And Archie?
If it's a startup, like model development, I think that is, if you look at the fastest growing companies, Cursor, Synthesia, 11 Labs, Harvey, everyone has model development in-house. And I think that is the future and what you'll hear a lot more from startups in a year's time.
Fantastic. Thank you so much both for your insight into the state of European tech, the markets, and where we're going in the future. A round of applause for our wonderful panel here.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.